Let's say thank you to God for this band. Thanks, gang. You can all be seated. So, step up to the plate. Game number 2, or week number 2. We are in a series about life lessons that we can learn from the game of baseball, softball, any kind of ball where you run around a bunch of bases. And I want to ask first, today, I mean, it might change with every week, how many of here would say you're like a baseball buff? So you're a baseball buff? Okay, good. Second row even. That's pretty good seat. Those cost you something, I bet, right? How many would you say are a movie buff? Okay. Well, then let's see how well you do here. I'm going to put up a screenshot from a baseball movie in just a second. And the first one who calls out the scene's most famous line, I mean, maybe not this exact wording that you're seeing on screen, but if you know the famous line from this movie, just shout it out, and the winner will be the MVP today. I know that's pretty exciting. All right, everybody's got it. There's no crying in baseball. That's absolutely. So, you've seen the movie A League of Their Own with Tom Hanks, Gina Davis, Madonna, and all the rest. So we're going to try to play a clip of this, but first, parents, warning. There's language coming up. Really, it's too late. If you brought your kid in here and said it to KP Kids, it's too late. And if they like baseball so much they want to be in here, then they probably heard these words anyway. So we'll be seeing Coach Jimmy Dugan, a former Chicago Cub who drank himself out of the major leagues, in his new position as coach of the Rockford Peaches. I got to get this right. One of the founding clubs of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And in this scene, he gently points out to a right fielder, Evelyn Gardner is her name, about a little mistake she might have made. So let's give it a try.
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Why don't you leave her alone, Jimmy?
Oh, you zip it, Doris. Rogers Hornsby was my manager, and he called me a talking pile of pig shit. And that was when my parents drove over and got my fish again to see me play the game. And did I cry? No. And you know why? No. Because there's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball. No crying.
There you have it. And sometimes there's sketchy audio in baseball too. I appreciate your grace. So, baseball may have been called over the years a thinking man's game, but it's full of emotion, for sure, which we know. And honestly, I told you the story last week of me being kind of embarrassed because I didn't know to bring my glove from home, and probably I did cry, but maybe. I've seen all sorts of people cry, men, women, boys, and girls, during baseball games, after baseball games, and sometimes watching their kids play baseball games. So it's an emotional game. Which also brings me then to this picture you see behind me. A school administrator, currently, a working mom, a faithful cop courier, and a girls softball coach. Now, this was back in her high school days, where she was a pitcher for Olathe South. But currently, she's an Olathe West assistant principal, and her name is Megan Black. So, Megan, are you still in the room? Oh, yeah, over there. Okay, thank you. So, I consulted Megan as both a former player and a current coach, and just thought I would get some opinions about baseball, and especially the prospect of raising children to understand the sport and to love it enough that they wanted to play it better, right? And all the emotions involved. So Megan was a star pitcher at Olathe South. She went on to play at Emporia State. I think that's her there, where she got a bachelor's and a master's degree, all in the education space. And I want to read I asked her to send me some emails, or an email with some stories about her and Chuck Black's 10-year-old daughter, Bella. So, this is what I heard. 3 years ago, Bella started out on this competitive team as one of the lesser talented, lesser athletic girls on the team. She was last in the batting lineup, and she struggled to catch and throw. When she would make a mistake, she burst into tears. And as her coach and parent, it wasn't the hitting, catching, or throwing that was the point of frustration for me. It was how she handled her failure. Anytime she got out, tears. Anytime she made a mistake in the field, tears. We had so many good conversations about mental toughness, being coachable, being a good teammate. When you cry, you bring your whole team down, etc. And that failure can be a good thing because then we learn something and we grow. Having those conversations with an 8-year-old, especially an 8-year-old perfectionist, was hard. And I thought things were never going to get better. Through these conversations, though, I learned that she didn't really want to cry. She was actively trying not to cry. And then one day, Stella finally found the words to talk about what she was feeling. And she said to me, "Mom, I'm not crying because I'm mad at myself or because I'm trying to be a bad teammate. I'm not trying to be uncoachable. I cry because I just get so embarrassed when I can't do what the other girls are doing." Megan says, "Once I wiped away my own tears, because being a mom is hard, I said, now this is something we can work with. I told her I was proud of her for finding the right words to express her feelings and that we were all going to get through this together. We had a lot of honest conversations about how she may not be the most talented on the team. I'm not a parent who's going to make up stuff about my kids, give them a false impression. But I told her if you want to be good at softball, you're going to have to work harder than some of the others. Are you up for that?" Megan asked. And Stella said, "Yes, absolutely." So they started putting in the extra work. They do extra sessions together. Megan and Chuck hired her a hitting coach to practice with her hitting and get better. Over the last 2 years, her parents have seen an incredible amount of growth inside of Stella. Megan said she's put in the hard work into seeing the benefits. She no longer bats last, but she's in the middle of the batting order. And coolest of all, she gets to play first base. You know how well you have to catch to play first base? I guess and throw too, right? But she still gets frustrated, and she's able to channel these emotions, and she asks to put in the extra work to keep improving herself. Megan closes by saying, "Proud isn't a big enough word to express how I feel about her journey so far with softball, and it has nothing to do with the sport." So, I imagine Stella's in KP Kids right now, but let's say kudos to Megan and congratulations to Megan and Chuck for an awesome young lady. So there's another cob carrier that I'd like to tell you about who knows the values of hard work and risk readiness. Bo and Angie were here last week. I can't see them in the dark if they're here now, but I told them I'd share their picture. Are you there? Yeah, I recognize that laugh. There you are. Hi, Bo. So anyway, cob carrier Bo Martin. He is a registered nurse whose resume includes both emergency rooms and elementary schools. Imagine which is tougher. And he gave all that up for a good number of years to create and build a super brewery, which I was partial to, from scratch in Kansas City, Kansas, called Outfield Beer. Obviously, he's a baseball buff. The name of the brewery was Outfield Beer, and all the beers had a baseball name. He and his wife Angie, then they relocated the brewery and bar from kind of a mid-commercial strip mall off of K32 and KCK. Now, if you're watching online, you're like, "What are you talking about, Pastor Dan?" You don't need a map. Just follow the basic story. Hi, guys. So he moved it from Edwardsville into Bonner Springs into that really old and really kind of hip fuel house complex they have there on 2nd Street. So Bo and his brewery developed and supplied 2 different kinds of beer to the minor league stadium up in KCK Legends, which was formerly known as the what? T-Bones, and now is known, they've licensed the name and kind of gotten all into supporting the Kansas City Monarchs, the original and probably the most successful Negro Leagues American baseball team back decades and decades ago. So, Drew Beard, he's got a Pils called Turn 2, and then, is it a lager that's Monarch, Bo? A dark pill. Okay, sorry, because that was my favorite, right? Was the Dark Pills the Monarch? Anyway, the namesake Monarch was a dominant Negro League team, and from that team, we got to show the beer. There it is. Boom. He obviously had a good graphics guy too, or gal. This team, the original Kansas City Monarchs, was full of all sorts of winning household names that you'd even know now. Satchel Paige, Ernie Banks, and for one season, right after World War II, a guy named Jackie Robinson. So as Bo said, actually, up there, Satchel, Jackie there, and the team. As Bo told me, baseball was the first sport people could really understand. It wasn't polo or golf or badminton. You simply hit, you caught, and you tried to steal a base. And for that, you could earn a living. You better do it well or someone's going to replace you, he told me. You have to earn a spot on the roster, and then week after week, you got to work hard to keep it. The average working man or woman in the 20s, 30s, 40s could understand that and could relate to it, because that was working life for all of us these last couple centuries. So anyway, Bo would also regale me about stories about Babe Ruth, the famous outfielder, pitcher, and heavy drinker, the overeater who'd stay up all night, sometimes by himself, sometimes with a lady, and then he would have about a couple hours of sleep and he'd wake up and he'd hit a home run the next day. Right? So the average fan could barely imagine having that much fun and not getting arrested for it. And he could never imagine being that successful in the daytime job that he had. So Bo and I were talking theology and all sorts of stuff, and he both said this. So he said, think back to the 1930s. Is Jesus the Son of God, and will he accept me despite my faults? Whatever you heard in the church, you might not remember, but you look at Babe Ruth and you think, yes, he can. Because he's clearly blessing Babe Ruth. Anyway, here is Bo and Angie with Bob Kendrick, the president of the Negro League's Baseball Museum. And looks like you're happy to be there with him. That's cool. So, anyway, if you want to spend a long coffee hour learning a lot of cool stories about baseball, grab Bo afterwards. He's amazing. Anyway, so Evelyn Gardner, the one who got yelled at for crying, and Babe Ruth, they had something in common. They both got super emotional playing baseball, partially because, like us, they were human. But people also got emotional about Babe Ruth because they were human too. Not because he was such a good man character-wise, but honestly, because he was so darn human. For pros and cons, with all his braggadocio and bad choices, he was great with a bat. And in some ways, that kind of made them feel he was redeemed. Now, on the opposite side of that coin, think about baseball characters with a ton of character and all that. You got, maybe Hank Aaron probably is the one I think of. And Jesus, I think of Jesus too. So if you want to get into Jesus with me, pull up your digital device, John 11, or open your analog Bible. And we're going to open up to John 11, and we're going to do some reading. Now we're going to do some reading because I want us to think about emotions. How we handle our emotions affects not only our marriage, our friends, our work, and our world, but as we saw with Megan and Chuck, how we handle our emotions also forms our children too. So I think it's worth studying for all sorts of reasons. It begins like this, John 11, verse 1. So a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick, so the two sisters, Mary and Martha, who we know from other stories too, right, sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend, our brother, is very sick. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will reveal his glory from this. So although Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, he stayed there where he was for the next 2 days. Finally, he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. They talked some more, skipping that for brevity. 17. When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in the grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary for their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him. But Mary stayed in the house. Now, you remember the story of Mary and Martha and Jesus visiting for lunch or supper, right? Who was the one that was working in the kitchen super hard? Martha, 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 right? And the one sitting at Jesus' feet, kind of just waiting to learn something, was who? Mary, right? So they seem to operate the same way in this story too. Martha goes to find Jesus. Mary's just going to wait there, and she'll call if she'll come if she's needed. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you'd only been here, my brother wouldn't have died." And then she kind of hints, "But even now, I know God will give you whatever you ask." And it was not just trivial that she wanted her brother back. It wasn't just because she loved him. It was very hard to be a single woman or even a pair of single women in that culture without a man, without a father, without an uncle, most especially without a brother who's going to grow old at the same rate you do and is there to protect you. So they had lots of reasons for wanting Lazarus back if they possibly could. And then Jesus told her, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha's like, "Yes, he will rise. I know, with everybody else at the last day." But Jesus told her, "No, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying, what we call eternal life. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me now, which I call abundant life, will never die." Do you believe this, Martha? She said, "Yes, Lord. I've always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God." Then she returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, "The teacher's here and he wants to see you." It's a good reminder to us. Rabbi doesn't mean just a guy who kind of is the lead dude in the Jewish synagogue currently now, also the lead female teacher. But the purpose of a rabbi is to teach the Hebrew scriptures to the people. Kind of different between like pastor and preacher. So Mary immediately went to him. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her get up and leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep. So they followed her there. She probably wants to be with her deceased brother in privacy. Let's go watch, right? I mean, when Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if only you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died." So for once, Mary and Martha are on the same wavelength, right? They both are thinking, it's not Jesus' fault, but it kind of is, right? I mean, he's our friend, but what the heck, Jesus? When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, now this is the one who seemed to hang more on his words, who really wanted to like any male disciple, wanted to learn the ways of the kingdom of God, right? So he loved Martha, but Mary was especially invested in him, and he probably returning in a return way to her. So as he saw her weeping, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. That's interesting, isn't it? How many times does sadness and grief for us morph into anger? "Where have you put him?" he asked them. They told him, "Lord, come and see." And then Jesus cried. He wept. The people who were standing nearby said, "See how much he loved him?" But some said, "This guy healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" Apparently his friend. Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb. A cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. "Roll the stone aside," Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, the organized one who's thinking of the practical thing, said, "So Master, he's been dead 4 days. The smell will be bad." Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out!" And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth, and Jesus said to them, "Unwrap him and let him go." Which I love because it's kind of like a reminder of how it's not just death that binds us. It's the way that the rest of society thinks about death. We've got to wrap everybody up, and we've got to keep them tight. But if we let go of death and the fear of death, we have a liberation unlike anything we've ever known. Okay, mini sermon, back to 45. Many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen, but some went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So from that time on, the Jewish leaders began to plot Jesus' death. As a result, Jesus stopped his public ministry among the people, and he left Jerusalem and the suburbs. He went to a place near the wilderness, to the village of Ephraim, and stayed there with his disciples. Now, as you hear that, how many times have we seen in Scripture that Jesus went off to a quiet place to pray? If things were getting stressful, if he was trying to get his bearings straight, if he just was tired of people. But this is a different thing. He's lost his best friend. Now he returned him back to life, but the roller coaster he was on. And then, of course, the fact that spies or just grumpy people or antagonists had turned him in and told the story to the rabbis and the people in authority. So he goes out, he stays with his disciples, and I don't know about you, but I kind of get why Jesus was sad, right? I mean, before he raised Lazarus, he was sad that his best friend had died. He was sad that, no, really, Lazarus was probably his only close guy friend. I mean, guys, we got a bunch of contacts, network, acquaintances, and maybe a small handful of guys we call our friends, and some of us might just have like one best friend. Now remember, he had Peter, James, and John, but those were kind of work friends, right? Lazarus was his most close non-work friend. And to see Lazarus die from whatever it was, a disease or an accident or something, that just gripped him in a way, partially because he knew his own death was coming, right? His own journey to Jerusalem wasn't going to be too far away. So he grieved that. So I Googled the question, because, that's what educated master's level divinity students do, is I just Googled, why was Jesus so mad or so sad? You're like, you could have done that. But you didn't, so here I am. The theologian said, number one, he might have been sad because the enemy he came to defeat, the power of death, was obviously still in charge of the world. And he knew even after he laid his body down on the cross and he came out of the tomb, he knew that death would have lost most of its power, but it wouldn't have disappeared. You and I, most of us, we trust in Jesus with our present and our eternity, but we're still going to die. And for some reason, that just made Jesus super sad, super angry even. But the other reason that I saw on the theologian speak kind of Wikipedia stuff was maybe Jesus was thinking about his own DNA and the consequences of the sin that were woven into him as a human. I mean, because he was fully human. All that selfishness and pride and wanting to get ahead and wanting to have a good reputation, and maybe if you're lucky, you find a partner and settle down with and have kids and have a nice Olive Garden, right? I mean, not the restaurant. There's a lot of other places besides Olive Garden he may have been dreaming of. But like figs and stuff in your backyard type of thing. Anyway, so all those consequences of sin were always going to be death, including the deaths of the undeserving and the innocent. And Jesus' heart beat with compassion. And when you see innocent people suffering and dying, you get mad. That's kind of how God wove that into us. He made us in his image, not just how we look, but how we feel. So anyway, but then I thought, what I haven't seen here online is kind of my take. What I haven't seen online is just really about how human Jesus was. I mean, couldn't it have been that Jesus was just mad? I mean, like viscerally mad at his best friend for dying, for abandoning him. I can just imagine, Lazarus, I was going to come talk to you about what's facing me. I'm going to be nailed to a cross, and then you go and die. And obviously he had the power and he raised him again, but just the initial emotion of, I don't want to be abandoned. And as those of you who lost somebody precious and close to you, know that the anger at being abandoned is a real thing. It reminds me of something that Dave Lingenfelter, said to me just a few months ago. He said, I heard this great quote, I thought you'd like it, Dan. Grief is just love with no place to go. And in the moment that Jesus heard his best friend was dead, and he heard it, he knew it was happening, but then when he got there and he saw it right in front of his face, he's like, the grief of losing him, the grief of knowing he's going to lose his life, the grief of giving up the opportunity. I mean, he loved being alive. He went to parties, he hung out with partiers and the holy people. He was giving up the chance to have a wife and a family, to see the world change with people following him and his love. He's given up all that stuff. And there was some grief there and it had no place to go except to the cross. Now, I looked up something from the Hospice Federation of America, and I saw some good words, and if you'll bear with me, I want to read a couple of them to you. By a couple, I mean a couple screens worth, all right? Many who grieve say, how can I be angry at them for dying? They know they couldn't help dying. Aghast or ashamed at the idea of blaming them, these feelings get stuffed down and denied. Nonetheless, these feelings exist, whether they're expressed or not. Many people do, in fact, feel angry when someone they love dies. Angry at being abandoned, angry at the extent of the pain, angry that our life has changed, angry that managing the grief, not just our grief, but the grief of our children, feels difficult, and angry that the world suddenly feels different. But it's not their fault they died, but the world is still different, and that's really heavy on us. It feels empty, unsafe, and lonely. Swallowed feelings don't disappear. Notice how Jesus didn't swallow those feelings like, I'm the Messiah, I can't see me, nobody can see me cry. Swallowed feelings don't disappear. Instead, they become the basis for more bad things, unresolved grief, depression, anxiety, and even chronic physical symptoms. Intense feelings need to be expressed, not denied. Being able to say out loud, I'm angry, may be all that it takes. Then again, you may need to see I'm angry a bunch of times and express it out loud and then tell people stories about why you're angry, or stories about why the person who's gone is somebody you love so much. To fully release anger, you may need to have some physical way to do it. Like pounding a pillow or chopping wood or yelling loudly in the privacy of your own bathroom or out in the woods somewhere. Think Jesus, right? He moved to Ephraim, or to the country around there, so that he could get some outdoor time and privacy. As they close here in this website I read, anger can make a griever feel powerful in the face of experiences like loss, where one naturally feels pretty powerless. Some may prefer to be angry so as not appear vulnerable or tearful or sad. You know, it makes me think about me, right? When I sometimes take my fist and pound on the table because I accidentally hit my head on the cupboard door. Sadness and grief and pain, they are all wrapped up together. So anyway, Hank Aaron, back to the other sermon. Hank Aaron is the one who broke Babe Ruth's home run record in 1974, and he added 40 more home runs in the season. Now, Hank said many inspiring leadership things. In fact, I was going to use one last week, but I got telling another story. There I went. Hank Aaron said many things. He said, in playing ball and in life, a person occasionally gets the opportunity to do something great. When the time comes, only two things matter: being prepared to seize the moment and having the courage to take your best shot. Well, I heard an interview, an old interview, obviously, with Hank Aaron on NPR the other night, and it was talking about the day he broke that record at his home stadium field with the Atlanta Braves. And he said, yeah, they were super excited in Atlanta that night. He said, but for me, Atlanta isn't real life. Atlanta's still in Georgia. And you know what he meant by that. Hank Aaron was America's newest baseball legend. He got another 40 runs, I think I said, after that big swing. Much of America loved him, but a lot of America despised him, even hated him, because of the color of his skin. He wrote in his autobiography, I kept feeling more and more strongly that I had to break the record not only for myself and for Jackie Robinson and for black people, but also to strike back at the vicious little people who wanted to keep me from doing it. All that hatred left a deep scar on him. You know that he got almost 100,000 pieces of mail in his career? About 90,000 is what one source said. And we don't know how many were positive and how many were negative, but he got tons of hate mail. Hate mail that was so abominable that people would describe to him what they were going to do to him, kind of like those really evil trolls on the internet. They would describe what they were going to do, but then they'd sign their name and put their name and address on the envelope. Like there was absolutely no shame. Everybody would say this to a black man who was going to overtake the record of a white man. And while racism intentional or subconscious, is still a part of our world, so is fear. So is fear. In fact, in my humble layman's opinion, all of us people, heck, all of us mammals, as far as I've seen, get angry. It's not the primary emotion. The primary emotions, I think, behind anger are fear and pain, right? We all feel fear and pain, us and the dogs and the lions and the monkeys and all those other animals. But the uniquely human thing is we also feel injustice. And that's what Hank Aaron was feeling. That's what Ralph Yarl's friends, supporters, and all those protesters here in Kansas City, just a few miles from here. It wasn't just the pain of seeing this teenager shot not once but twice by a very scared old man, according to his grandson. Not scared that he was at the door, but scared because he watched cable news all the time. All this fear and all this just submerged antipathy toward people of a different color. That's what makes the crowds outside so scared, so angry. With posters like this, ringing a doorbell is not a crime. No, it was injustice that made Jesus' heart beat also, and it made him mad. I want to remind you of something that, has anybody heard the song? It was from Michael Card about Jesus weeping. I want to close with that with you here. Did Jesus weep for their unbelief? Or did he cry because his friend had died? Took on himself all of their pain and fear and explained the mystery of his silent tears. Jesus wept that day mysterious silent tears. The reason that he cried never will be clear. But there's one certain thing now that we can say. He had come to wipe all their tears away. Or as John of Patmos said, who wrote the Revelation, then I heard a new heaven and new earth. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them and they will be his people. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forevermore. And the one sitting on the throne said, look, I am making all things new. My prayer for you, brothers and sisters, this week is that you look in your life to see where God is making something new, where God is taking the fear or the pain or the injustice that swirls around you in your life, and where he is begging you to trust him with that, to transform these hard things into some super power of grace that you can use in the world to change lives with Jesus' love. I contend that if you could find this week, search your heart, and if you can't find your heart, ask your spouse. They'll tell you the answer. Find out what it is that's making you so mad, making you so frustrated. And then trust Jesus enough that if you give it to him, he will take it, he will hold it, and the burden you carry will become light. I pray this and I challenge you in Jesus' holy name.